Nice to be here today and thanks for the invitation. So today I'm going to take you through a bit of GFC's journey in developing new supply chains in China. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction to who we are as an industry, who GFC is, and then some of our activities in China and developing new supply chains in China. I'll say from the outset to avoid some of the blank stares. You'll hear me refer to GFC through the course of the conversation. I'm not referring to the events of 2008. We claim that we owned the acronym well before the global financial crisis. So today I'm not going to focus on the physical supply chain. Well, I'm going to focus on what we've been doing to develop a physical supply chain, but I don't think that you can talk about developing a physical supply chain without also focusing on things like business development, marketing and promotion and sales, because without a market, without demand, you essentially don't have a supply chain. So you'll see that I'm going to weave some of that through my talk today. And I'll also say I'm going to try and stay ahead of Patrick's flashcards, but it is challenging to cover it. I'm going to be going through the last 5 years of what we've been doing to develop our supply chain in China, and it's challenging to cover that in detail for a market like China, but I will try and move through it quickly. But if I move through it too quickly, of course, there are opportunities for questions at the end. So first of all, a brief intro to our industry. So we're Australia's largest wild-caught fishery. Gross value of product is around about $500 million a year. We're a quota-run fishery, which is really important for a number of reasons. One is that we fish all year round, which means we have a constant supply into the market. It also means that our fishers can fish to the market, so when demand is good, they can fish. When it's not good, they won't fish, which means that they can have real control over supply and demand. It also improves product quality, so they only keep the highest value product. They throw back the product that's not is not worth something today. It's either damaged or it's not the grade that the market wants, and they can catch it again the next day. Low environmental impact, so from a sustainability and environmental impact point of view, a quota-run fishery is really important. And of course, it means that we can manage the fishery for future generations and for sustainability. So we were the first fishery in the world to be MSC certified, and we're really proud of that fact, and we really take sustainability and the future of our fishery for future generations very seriously. And that's also very important from a brand and marketing point of view, to be able to say to our end customers that you're supporting a product which is sustainable, it's fresh, it's from the ocean, but it'll be there for generations to come. So a bit of our story. We were formed in 1950. GFC was formed in 1950 by a group of fishermen who wanted to take control of their own destiny. During that, and ever since that time, we have been trading under the brand name of Brollis. So you can see in our brand, the Brollis brand name, which is as old as the organisation, and that name is derived from the Brollis Islands, which is the pristine islands off the coast of Geraldton. But now our fishery spans over 1,000 kilometres of coastline, and we're underpinned by hundreds of family operations and small businesses, which are made up of second, third, fourth generation fishers in many instances. So it's these everyday fishers that GFC serves to exist. We are owned by the fishers and we serve to exist them. And because of the support that we've had from the fishers, we've grown over those 70 years to make up roughly 60% of the Western rock lobster market. And this makes us one of the largest, if not the largest, players on the world stage, particularly for live rock lobster. And it's also this connection with our members, which is an important part of our brand proposition. We can honestly say to our consumers that when you buy from us, you are buying from the fishers who caught the product. In terms of where we sit within global trade, given the size of the WA industry and GFC's share of the industry, we constitute global trade of live rock lobster around about 25% to 30%, sometimes upwards of 40 to 50% of global trade at any one point in time. So this puts our fishers in a really unique position in that we have constant supply, and unlike many other primary producers worldwide, they are price makers, not price takers. So given our scale, we dictate the price, which is dictated to us by the fishers and when they decide on when to put their product into the market. So we export into and we have a history of supplying many markets worldwide, and we've seen trade shift between many markets, and many markets come and peak and trough. So we started trading in the US way back when, then China became the main market, Taiwan, and today obviously China. So we still service all of our traditional markets, but by far and away China is now our number one market, with 95 to 97% of our product ending up in that market. So we've been trading with China since 1990, and we've seen solid growth year on year in that market. Pre-Chapter, so pre the free trade agreement, trade with China was quite challenging. So product made its way into China through third countries, which is commonly referred to as the grey trade. So technically, until Chapter and until we started supplying direct, we were actually exporting, we weren't exporting to China. But since free trade, we've seen an explosion of opportunity, and I think that our industry from a Chapter point of view has been a real shining light, and I think that there's no doubt that the government and us as an industry are really happy with what Chapter has delivered, and also the Chinese government in terms of the tariffs might have reduced, but now the Chinese government is generating VAT or GST revenue on nearly $500 million of product, which they didn't have before. So our product in China, we're very fortunate that consumers in China hold our product very close to their heart. It's an important ingredient in celebrations, and there's many more Chinese demanding lobsters than there are lobsters to go around. But an important point is that the Chinese love live seafood, so that creates a number of challenges. Number one, the supply chain is challenging, so time to market and an efficient supply chain is absolutely critical, but it also means that we can't value add the live product. So for us to generate value, we need to look at ways to increase the value of that product and increase the value of the product itself. We can't manufacture new lobsters, so the way that we increase value for the product is to create new markets and to spread the supply thinner over a larger area, which then limits supply and pushes prices up. So our strategy in China, you hear it said a lot, China's not one market. China is a country of 1.4 billion people and subcultures as diverse as the imagination. And it's evolving faster than any traditional business strategy can handle. So therefore our strategy needs to be able to handle a market like that that's evolving so quickly, and it needs to be dynamic and ever-changing. But at its core, what we aim to do with our strategy in China is a number of things. First of all, we aim to diversify the sales and supply channels, which shifts the supply and demand balance, as I was saying earlier, and therefore drives prices higher. We aim to shorten the supply chain and connect more with the end consumers, thereby delivering a better value product at a lower cost for our fishers. We only want to service, and we want to keep trying to find the top echelon, and we want to become China friendly, and we want to maintain a nimble approach. China changes from the moment you've implemented a strategy. You need to start changing that strategy to change. And underlying all of it, we need a willingness to explore and a willingness to fail. So what was our first step in 2015? Before Chapter came into effect, we started to plan and built our first facility within China in the Baiyun Airport, which is in Guangzhou, so it's the gateway to China for fresh food. 20-tonne storage facility, and this facility was developed specifically to take advantage of pre-Chapter. and new laws in China at the time, which were cross-border laws, which meant that through a bonded warehouse that we had established with our partners, we could send product into China tariff-free. So we saw this as a way to get a jump on the free trade. And herein lied our first big lesson, and the change at which China can, and the rate at which China can change. Shortly after we commissioned, the Chinese changed their rules around cross-border, and our product was pulled off the allowable list, which meant that we couldn't take advantage of the cross-border rules. But ironically, the facility still paid for itself because we used it as a staging point, and we used the extra 20 tonnes of storage when we needed it to store products in China, and also to distribute it to third countries. So there was our first big lesson, how quickly China can change and how we need to be willing to change and adapt with it. Alongside commissioning Baiyun, we established our China company, again before free trade came into effect. We didn't really have a clear strategy, but we knew that in the future having a Chinese company would be of value. Establishing a company in China is time consuming and challenging, so we wanted to get ahead of the game. And by establishing GFC China, it meant that we could operate as a legal entity within China and do as the Chinese do. We also did a lot of market research, so you can fall into the trap of assuming what the market and what the Chinese want, but we wanted to make sure that we had an understanding as to how the Chinese, the various segments of the Chinese market viewed the product and viewed us as a company, so that when we started promoting ourselves in China, we were doing it with the Chinese in mind. Rather than trying to push our perceptions and push our brand into the market, we were actually delivering what we thought that they want. So we developed a whole brand proposition. We ran in-market surveys, focus groups and analysis, and came up with a good understanding as to what the different segments were and how they viewed our product. And from that we saw the opportunity, and through all of this we saw the explosive growth of e-commerce in China, and we developed an e-commerce offering whereby through our China company, which we now had a clear strategy for, we developed a product to deliver live rock lobster into the homes of Chinese in three of the major cities, China, Beijing, Shanghai and Guangzhou. And through the research we also did a lot of work around what do they want in packaging, how will they consume it, what sort of assistance do they need. So you can see there that we developed gloves for handling of the live lobster. We contained the lobsters within mesh, which made them easy to handle, temperature controlled packaging, and boxes which were tailored all towards the China market, and we sold on Tmall and JD.com. Interestingly, in another lesson, started supplying in Beijing. We didn't anticipate the freezing cold weather up in Beijing, so while we put a lot of research into how to keep the lobster cool, we actually then had to turn the tables and figure out how to keep them warm while we were delivering it to the lobsters' homes. To the Chinese homes. So that was another little lesson that we didn't quite anticipate. And then the next step around that was how to develop the product quickly to make sure that it's delivered in the best possible quality when it arrives in the consumer's home. So we then downsized. We moved out of the Baiyun facility and downsized to small purpose-built retail facilities in the biggest courier company within China called Shungfeng, which meant that we could pack the lobster, deliver it next door, put it on a truck and deliver it to the consumers' homes within 12 hours. The other thing that we did here is that these facilities are totally mobile, so we now have a nimble and a more flexible approach to the market, so that as we learnt where the opportunities were, we could pick up those facilities and move them to wherever we needed. An important part of any supply chain is making sure when you get your product there, if you're successful, you don't end up being the victim of copycats. So before we took any step, and alongside all of this, we did a lot of work around developing our branding and our IP and IP agreements, and we're ruthless in making sure that we scour the market to make sure that no one's using our branding and IP, and we're very selective about who we give permission to use our brands. And so each of these brands here are all trademarked and protected in China. So that sort of touches a little bit on the retail side of things, but still by far and away the business to business or B2B is still a core part of our business, and we want to grow the number of customers. So we've invested a lot in figuring out how we can service those customers in an efficient way, to the point now where on a daily basis our sales team of 3 people in Perth are dealing with nearly 100 active customers on a daily basis on our auction platform, on our online sales platform, which we've also now developed into an auction platform. So that process of developing new markets, alongside that we need to make sure that we can service those markets. If a customer comes to us and says, I want to buy your product, they need to be able to click the button and buy the product today without having any bad experiences. So we've invested a lot in that, as well as obviously the online, the online sales for retail. And we've also used third-party sales platforms. So there's a company in China called GFresh, where we've got a virtual store and we're selling to thousands of customers through that platform as well. So sales and how you sell to your customer, if you're trying to increase your market, is critically important. And then alongside that is your promotions. So a lot of you would have heard of WeChat. We have WeChat, our own business WeChat site set up where customers can get on, learn about us, interact with our staff, talk with our staff, both from a B2B, so business to business, our wholesale, retail, wholesale, hotel, food service customers, as well as our retail customers. So I can talk all day about China. I've very much skimmed over the top because I know that my 1 minute flag's coming up if it hasn't come up already. But hopefully it gives you a sense as to some of the things that we've been doing, some of the challenges and the journey that we're on. And the journey that we're on, we're very much on the first step and we're still very much learning. But you really can't do it without a good team who understands what our strategy is, who we are and why we're doing what we're doing. And we've got a fantastic team now, both in China as well as Australia, who are helping linking our supply chain across the two. So just quickly, lessons learnt. There's so many lessons, it's hard to know where to start, but I can boil it down to a few. First of all, know what your objectives are if you're going to be getting into China. So before you do anything, understand what you want to achieve if you're going to tackle that market. Know what markets inside China you're going to target and where the opportunities are, because if you try and target the whole of the China market, you will fail. You have to look at where and what the market is that you're looking to service. You have to be nimble in your approach. Strong relationships are absolutely key, and you have to be ready for the unexpected. So with that, I'm 30 seconds ahead of time, but hopefully that gives you a sense as to our new supply chains in China and what we've been doing to develop up there. And look forward to sharing the story as we go through. Thank you.
Green